I was golfing, I was fishing, I'm in Paris, she was going to walk the dog. All lies told by Scott Peterson in the aftermath of his wife's disappearance. For a man who craved a single and childless lifestyle, murder, for some chilling reason, was the only answer. Our moment in crime is the murder of Laci Peterson. 13th of April 2003. Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park. A couple walking along the San Francisco Bay shore find the well-preserved body of a male fetus. The following day, just a mile from where the fetus was found, the body of a recently pregnant woman is washed ashore. DNA tests confirm that the bodies are of a mother and son. For investigators, it was clear that a long missing persons investigation had come to an end when the bodies' identities were confirmed as Laci Peterson and her unborn child, Connor. Laci Denise Peterson, née Rocha, was born in Modesto, California on the 4th of May 1975. She practiced cheerleading in school, and upon graduating high school she enrolled in California Polytechnic State University, where she majored in ornamental horticulture. While Laci dreamed of putting her degree to good use by opening a specialty plant shop, the 27-year-old's day job was that of a substitute teacher. In May 2002, Laci became pregnant with her son, Connor. By all accounts, Laci was excited about spending Christmas with family before becoming a mother. But Laci would never get to experience motherhood. On Christmas Eve 2002, Laci would lose her life at the hands of her husband, Scott Peterson. The Modesto Police Department usually waits 24 to 48 hours to investigate a missing persons case, but when Laci Peterson's parents reported their daughter missing, an exception was made for the first time. According to Scott Peterson, whom Laci had married in August 1997, he had spent the day fishing in the San Francisco Bay, and when he left home that morning, Laci was planning on walking their dog, Mackenzie. But it was Christmas Eve, and the police felt it was extremely unlikely that Laci would be hiking with the dog when she was 8 months pregnant and had Christmas to prepare for. Unbeknownst to Laci's family, the police were already suspecting foul play, with Scott being the main suspect. Why would a heavily pregnant woman take off on Christmas Eve without telling anyone? It didn't take long for the local community to find out about Laci's disappearance. The initial searches of the surrounding neighbourhood and vigils were organised by Laci's family and friends. Posters were hung up and blue and yellow ribbons were handed out. Police from other counties became involved in the investigation. A $25,000 reward was set up for information leading to Laci's safe return. This reward eventually increased to $500,000. A website, LaciPeterson.com, was created and over 1,500 volunteers signed up to help in the search for Laci. Laci's family appealed to the media and remained supportive of Scott initially. What Scott wasn't aware of, however, was that his lies and activities were being monitored during the entire investigation. When asked by Diane Sawyer during a TV interview if he had killed his wife, Scott replied no. But the tears that Scott squeezed out of his eyes during the interview did not fool police. Despite the lack of a body and forensic evidence, police felt strongly that foul play was involved in Laci's disappearance and were willing to charge Scott with murder even though there was no body. Scott tried sticking to his original story, that he had spent Christmas Eve fishing in the San Francisco Bay, that Laci had planned to walk the dog when he left, and that when he returned home Laci had vanished. But many things about Scott's story didn't add up. A neighbour had found the couple's dog roaming the streets around 10:15 AM on Christmas Eve morning. When the neighbour returned the dog to the couple's house, Laci's Land Rover was parked in the driveway and no one was home. Laci's purse and jewellery were found in the home, even though she always kept these items on her. Scott said he had returned home from fishing to find the house empty and called Laci's mother to inform her that he couldn't find his wife. But police established that before he made the phone call, he had washed his clothes, cleaned the kitchen, ate a snack, and showered. This behaviour seemed odd to the police, considering that Scott claimed to be the one that had discovered Lacey was missing. Without being prompted, Scott produced a parking ticket in front of the police to prove he had been fishing. So why did he tell his father-in-law he had spent Christmas Eve golfing? Scott was reluctant to talk to the press from the start, even walking out of one press conference when asked if the police thought of him as a suspect. On Christmas Day itself, Scott had asked the police to make grief counsellors available to his wife's family. This caused alarm in the police, as it sounded like Scott knew that Lacey was not coming home. Then came the revelation that Scott had been having several extramarital affairs, pinning further suspicion on him. One of Scott's mistresses, Amber Frey, began to work with the police when she learned he was a person of interest in Lacey's disappearance on the news. Amber had no idea that Scott was married. He'd told her just weeks before Lacey vanished that he was recently widowed. Amber recorded several phone conversations with Scott for the police, catching him in several lies, such as telling Amber he was in Paris for New Year's when he was really at a candlelight vigil for Lacey, and admitting to telling Amber he had been widowed before Lacey went missing. Before the bodies were found, the only forensic evidence that the police had was a single black hair found on a pair of pliers. The pliers were found in Scott's fishing boat, leading police to believe that Scott had dumped Lacey's body in the San Francisco Bay after killing her. Testing confirmed that the hair did belong to Lacey. Crucially, Scott had been seen at the bay that Christmas Eve and on several occasions afterwards. After the bodies were washed ashore, autopsies were conducted. Lacey was dressed in maternity pants and a maternity bra. She had been decapitated and was missing several limbs. With the bodies and strand of hair as evidence, the police moved to arrest Scott. By now, Scott was under constant surveillance, and when he was arrested just days after the bodies were found, it looked as though Scott was planning to flee. Found in Scott's car was $15,000 in cash, several credit cards, clothes, camping gear, and a gun, among other items. Scott's hair and goatee had been bleached blonde. Scott's trial lasted from June 2004 to March 2005. The prosecution theorized that Lacey was suffocated or strangled in her home before her body was dumped in the bay. The defense suggested that Lacey had been kidnapped and held until she gave birth before mother and child were murdered and thrown into the bay. They also focused on the lack of forensic evidence and played down the importance of the circumstantial evidence. But the prosecution pushed ahead with their case, proving that Scott had looked into the tides and currents of the bay before Lacey was killed. They also showed that Scott had sold Lacey's vehicle and that he had expressed interest in selling their marital home. The prosecution believed that Lacey and her son lost their lives because Scott wanted to be single and childless. On the 12th of November 2004, the jury found Scott guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances for killing Lacey and second-degree murder for killing their unborn child. The jury cited Scott's attitude and the circumstantial evidence as indicators of his guilt. Scott was later sentenced to death, as the jury felt he had failed his responsibility to protect his wife and child. While Lacey's and Connor's family will forever feel their loss, their senseless murders led to the US Congress passing the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. Known as Lacey's and Connor's Law, the Act recognises unborn children as legal victims if injured or killed upon a listed crime of violence. Lacey's mother, Sharon, went on to set up the Laci and Connor Search and Rescue Fund. As for Scott, he remains in California's San Quentin State Prison, where he awaits his death by lethal injection. Thank you for watching this episode of One Moment in Crime. Look out for a new episode next Thursday. I wish you pleasant nightmares.